My 15-year-old daughter passed away. She was healthy. She passed in her sleep. That was the beginning of my big grief journey. There aren't 5 stages of grief. When someone asked me, how many are there? Infinite number of stages. And they're back and forth. And when I was yelling for her to come back, like, she's probably right here. I just need her to come back into her body. It's not fair for me to go on because that person's gone and my daughter was only 15. I don't want to be here without her. As parents, it's our job to protect our children. They will criticize us for everything. They're crying too much. You're not crying enough. 80% of people who lose a child get divorced. That's a myth. It was written in a book in like the 1960s. Grief can bring you together. It can bring you closer to people. If you go into the moment and literally right in the moment, no matter what situation you're in, as long as you're able to draw a breath, you're probably okay.
Welcome to Multispective. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
I'd just like to give you a bit of space to sort of share your story and your background and where it all begins for you.
That's a big question. I'll start with, in terms of grief, I would say I kind of start in the middle because the big grief event in my life was when my 15-year-old daughter passed away. And this was 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years ago in a little bit less than a month now. As I said, she was 15. It was a sudden transition. She was healthy, volleyball player, basketball player, and she passed away suddenly. She just passed in her sleep. So that was the beginning of what I would call my big grief journey. But going back further than that, as a child, I had a terrible fear of death, which is really weird because most kids don't think about death. But I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian home, and they talked a lot about heaven and hell, a lot about hell, and all the things you had to do to not go there, and how God was, I just visioned this angry God, and I just didn't understand why he was so angry. And because I viewed God as kind of a monster, I was like, I can't really love this God, but I have to, otherwise he's going to send me to hell. So I had this fear of death, just tremendous fear of death, panic attacks, all that stuff. That lasted until I was in my 30s. And at that time, I started saying, okay, I've got to figure this out because it's driving me crazy. So I started studying everything I could find about what happens when we die. What's the afterlife like? What is Christianity really right? What do other religions say about this? What does science say about it? I'm a very scientific person. I was a kid. I used to take things apart and put them back together again because I wanted to know how they work. So I'm like, what's the deal here? So that was when I was in my mid-30s. It was about 20 years later when Shayna passed. And the good thing for me is when she did make her transition, and you notice I don't ever say that she died because I don't believe we do die. So when she made her transition, I knew she was okay. And a big part of grief is we think of our loved ones as gone. They're lost, their lives are over. I didn't have to go through that. But for me, it's like, well, my life is over though, because when as a person who I had 2 daughters, and I really felt like I became who I was when my first daughter was born, and my other daughter's 3 years older than Shayna. So I'm like, but what about me? What do I do? What do I do with this? And you mentioned earlier, the right way to grieve, and it's interesting because we always think there's a right way to do things. How do I do this? Give me the manual. And a lot of my clients come to me like, just give me the manual, give me the 5 steps or whatever it is. I know there are 5 stages of grief, they'll say. So which stage am I in? That's just not true. There aren't 5 stages of grief. And someone asked me the other day, how many are there? I'm like, infinite number of stages. And they're back and forth, and it's up and down. And grief is unique for every person. And so not just for every person, but for every relationship. So when you have lost, say, a spouse, it's different from losing a child. When you lose a parent, it's different than losing a spouse. When you lose a best friend, it depends. It's just such a multifaceted thing. So there are some things that we can do to help us cope with grief. There's some things we can do to make ourselves more resilient. There are some things we can understand about grief, like in general, but there's no playbook. There's no right way to do it. Also, last thing I'll say on this is, it's not a disease. It's not something to recover from. It's not an ailment. It can be here to teach us. We can learn from it. We can grow from it. There's something called post-traumatic growth. We always hear about post-traumatic stress, but there's also post-traumatic growth. And it can be an opportunity for us to actually grow.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many facets to what you were just talking about. There's bits and pieces that I want to delve into your journey, and then bits and pieces that I want to talk about, like the topic of grief in general. Starting from, the early days, you mentioned that the term death was something that you feared. It was debilitating for you. It got in the way of so much of your health and well-being. And it was partly because of what religion had taught you. And you mentioned that you then decided, okay, I've got to start turning around this narrative now. I need to start to dig deep into it as opposed to avoiding it or being fearing it. I'm going to start reading about it. Tell me, what are some of the revelations that you had at that point? What were the ones that stuck with you? What is your belief right now on it?
Yeah, well, in terms of that, it started again for me. It started with religion, and it's really interesting because I find people on either end of the spectrum have real problems with death. People who are materialists who say this is it, this death is the end, and we just blink out and we're gone. They have a real problem with it, and then there's the fundamentalists in any religion. I always talk about Christianity because that's what I was raised in, but there's fundamentalists in all religions, and even some spiritual people are very fundamentalist about their mindsets. So what I decided to do is like basically start with a blank slate, like what's true, and I can only start from the blank slate. So I first studied my religion, Christianity, and I found out about the origins of the Bible. Where did this thing come from? Because a lot of Christians think it came wrapped up from God and wrapped in leather with gold, gold gilt around the edges. It's like that's not the way the Bible came to us. It was written by hundreds of men, only men, over hundreds of years, from different timelines, different types of things in the Bible. Some things are meant to be taken literally, some things are not. Christians tend to take all of these things literally, so I had to separate that out. I'll learn about the way that the canon, we call it, was put together, which books were selected to go in, which ones were left out. A lot of that was political. And the idea I was taught in Sunday school was it's perfect. The Bible is perfect in every word, every letter. You can't change anything. And that's just not true. There are even hundreds of translations even now, and some are more accurate than others. The King James is one of the worst. So I started with that, and I said, okay, what does this really say? So I went from being a evangelical or fundamentalist Christian to I became what's called a Christian universalist. And I realized the early church, most of the early church fathers believed in what we call universalism, that God saves everybody. And so I came to that perspective, which really alleviated my fear of death. I mean, it was just kind of gone at that point. But then again, went from that, like, what does Buddhism say? What does Hinduism say? Because I'm only a Christian because I was born in America to Christian parents. If I had been born in India, I would be a Hindu. So what does Hinduism say? And I found out that all the major religions anyway, there's a whole lot of truth in them. There's a big, giant kernel of truth in them. But there's all this crap around the edges. There's all this stuff that they layer on that makes them feel more, more right and more exclusive or whatever. So I'm like, what is the core? And then again, started looking at science because I'm an engineer. My background's chemical engineering. So I looked at that. So what did I discover? That as near-death experiences tell us, it's all about love. It's all about love. This God that we've been told is so angry and all that stuff, that's a projection of man onto what they think God would be like. That's not what the infinite is like. That's not what the creator is like. I found out there's a lot of truth in some of the fiction things we watch. There's a lot of truth in Star Wars. There's a lot of truth in the movie The Matrix. I believe that there's this source that's constantly reaching out to us, that we're constantly reaching back to, that we all come from, and that we all return to. And this trip, this life that we're on right now, is just a little blip. It's like it's an adventure. It's a vacation. It's a trip to the amusement park. I wrote a piece the other day. I referred to life as a trip to the amusement park. It's all these analogies, but it's not the ultimate reality. And where we come from, where my daughter has returned to, we all come from there. And you talked earlier about facing things, and the thing, it's natural to, if something is scary, we want to turn away from it. And death is scary because we don't know about it. And anything we don't know about, we're going to fear. So what do? We try to pretend that we're going to stay young forever. We try to pretend that we're not going to die. But it's the only thing in life, the only one thing in life that's absolutely certain. The moment you take that first breath is that there will be a moment when you take your last breath. Everything else is up for chance.
Yeah.
So why avoid the one thing you know is coming for us certainly? And you can turn this from, and that sounds maybe kind of morbid. It's like, oh, we're all going to die. It's more like we're all going to go home. We're all here on this adventure and enjoy it. Learn as much as you can while you're here. But just like a trip to the amusement park, you go, you ride the rides, you have the ice cream, you have all the treats and stuff. But there comes a time when you're tired and you just want to go home. And that's the way I view life now. So that's what I've learned in a nutshell.
That's interesting. I'm not sure if you'd said this, just to clarify. Do you think, though, that there is life after we've left this particular life? Do you think that there is a karma, the soul has dues, and it has to kind of fulfill or learn something in this particular amusement park?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, what I've come to understand, a lot of concepts from a lot of religions, I think, have been misunderstood, and karma is one of the most misunderstood things because the way some people view karma is that, okay, if you do a certain thing, there's like this abacus or something. There's somebody keeping score. So you did a good thing, so something good's going to happen to you. You did a bad thing, so something bad's going to happen to you, and it's all got to balance out in the end. I don't believe that's what karma really means. It's really the word karma means, from my understanding, means action. So the thing is, there is a natural tendency, of course, if you put bad things out, you create an environment where bad things are going to come back to you. If you're walking around being mean to people all the time, it's not very likely people are going to be nice to you. So that's just a natural law. I do believe in that. I absolutely 100% believe that life continues after our physical bodies die, and that's because of all the things I talked about. I look at it, there's like all these pillars of information. There's near-death experience, there's mediumship, there's consciousness research, there's precognition, ESP, there's after-death communications, there's all these different things that add up to show, quantum physics is starting to show that this reality is not what we think it is. So when I add all those things up together, I feel like I can make a very strong case for the fact that the afterlife exists. As strong as I could possibly make without having been there myself. But I've also talked to a few hundred people who have been there and say, yeah, when my body was on that gurney, I was up in the corner of the room. When I had my heart attack in the house and they put my body in the ambulance, I went in the ambulance with my body. In fact, I talked to someone the other day and she had a near-death experience at age of 7, one at 7 and one at 9. I forgot which one it was. But she had one where when she fell backwards, when she hit her head, she left her body and went to the hospital. And I said, I've never heard anybody who went straight to the hospital, and then her body came later. So
Yeah.
I've talked to people that have had these experiences.
I've done one episode as well where I interviewed somebody who had a near death experience. We always think that like science is the closest thing to the truth, but science also admits that they haven't really found the answers to everything. So when there is a large enough number of people that can validate or verify that this has happened, then therefore it has to be accepted. It's just maybe there isn't a scientific evidence to prove it, but they've never disproved it. They've never been able to say, no, that doesn't exist. They're just saying, give us a little bit of time until we can find the evidence.
Yeah, that's the promissory note of science, I think is the term that they use. It's like they'll say, well, we haven't figured this out yet, but give us enough time and we'll figure it out. And there will be a, quote, natural explanation for it. We will find a mechanism. And I've studied near-death experiences quite a bit, and I've seen people who are skeptics try to take them apart, and they'll say things like, well, it's just the evolutionary thing of the dying brain, and then it fires off DMT, and you have these experiences. Okay, well, let's assume that that's true. First of all, why would we develop that evolutionary thing? How is that beneficial for you to have the most lucid experience of your life at the time when you're dying? Why would the body develop that way? And then secondly, what about people who, like my friend Penny, who had a near-death experience and was in the hospital and saw her sister like several states away in her car driving to the airport to go to the hospital and knew what she was wearing. And when her sister got there, she's like, "Why were you wearing that god awful outfit when you were driving to the airport?" Now they can't explain, things like
Yeah.
that. And there's thousands of those. I think about 5% of the population they think has had a near death experience. So when you apply that to the world, hundreds of millions of people have had these experiences, and when you talk to them, they'll say, "No, it wasn't a dream. No, it wasn't drug induced. It was more real than me sitting here with you today. And by the way, I've completely changed my life since I've had the experience." Or I couldn't paint before, but now I'm like a world class painter. I couldn't play the piano, and now I can play. People come back with these abilities. So yeah, they're absolutely, there's something going on there that science can't explain materially.
Can you go back a little bit to that moment when sort of this happened in terms of like how was the processing mentally, emotionally for you and for your family at that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, okay, so I had this understanding that Shayna was okay. And I remember, when it happens, when you find someone who's no longer breathing, like your mind can't accept it. So you don't you're it's just it's happening, but you just reject it. So it feels like a dream. But I did have enough to know that, like, when I was yelling for her to come back, like, she's probably right here. I just need her to come back into her body. So there was that. But then there was also this thing like, okay, well, if you truly believe what you say you believe, then you shouldn't be upset, right? You should, because she's okay, she's happy, whatever. But there is that aspect of grief of like, we miss that other person. We want them to be with us physically. And I remember listening to a near death experience by Dr. Mary Neal, who'd had this experience, and she had gone to heaven. She'd seen Jesus and all this crazy stuff. And she was told her son was going to pass away before her, like within like the next 10 years or so. And so she lived with that after she came back for like about 10 years. And then her son did pass away at like 18 or 19. And when she was telling the story, she said she grieved the loss of her son. And I realized that gave me permission to grieve, because if someone who has had that experience, who's been to the other side, who knows what it's like, who knows about the life plan, the soul plan, who knows that her son's okay, knows all this stuff to the core of her being, if she still grieves, then I should still be able to grieve. And so I was like, okay, it's okay for me to grieve, right? But then there's this feeling like, but it's not fair for me to go on because that person's gone, and my daughter was only 15. And so, I don't want to be here without her. As parents, it's our job to protect our children, and I need to be there to protect her. And then I got to the point where I realized, I went back to, okay, this is what's the way it's supposed to be. This is planned. I believe it's planned, not by God, not by some other entity, but by us. I think we sit down before we come in and we plan these major points in our life. So if this was planned, then what's my plan? What's that was her plan for her time here. What's my plan? And so that's why I started doing the work that I do now, because I'm like, I want to be able to share this with people so that they don't have to go through the fear that I went through when I was a child, the fear of death, so that when we grieve, that we do it in a way that honors our loved one. I realize that for our loved one that's passed, it's interesting. People will say, well, they would want you to be happy. And I always say, no, they do want you to be. It's not that they would want you to be happy. They do want you to be happy. They are right here with us, and they are cheering us on. And they're like, okay, what are you going to do with your time while you're here? Because we're all going to be together soon enough. So make the most of it.
Would you say that your wife and your other child, your other daughter, also processed it in a similar way, or what kind of effect did it have on your family?
Yeah. For me, I was very, very fortunate. Now, I was the weird one. I am the weird one, but I was the weird one reading these books about near-death experiences and mediumship and stuff. I always visit myself, my wife in the bed at night, and she's reading a romance novel for her book club, and I'm reading, Gary Schwartz's the Afterlife Experiments. So I had an advantage over them. But my wife really, I'm really proud of her and my daughter Kayla, because Kayla was only 18 when her sister passed. They quickly said, okay, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to face it? And my wife we joined an organization called Helping Parents Heal. Less than a year after Shayna passed, we became very, very active in that. I'm on the board of Helping Parents Heal now. My wife is what we call a caring listener. So when people are struggling, they reach out and they call one of us or they call other people in the organization. So, and my wife she had never been interested in afterlife stuff, but she started reading the same stuff and listening to the same podcasts I do. And we've had medium readings where we sat with a medium who's told us about our daughter. They've done incredible. My daughter Kayla, she switched her major. She became a mental health counselor, so she wants to help people. So she's doing that now. She's 28 now. So that's what she does, and we are on the same page. It's like we're still a family of four. And you see my picture of Shayna behind me here in my studio. Shayna's a part of our lives, a very big part of our lives. We celebrate her birthday every year. We get together on the day that she passed. And we really make her a part of our lives.
I love that you were able to sort of work through this as a family together, as a family unit, and we're able to sort of like keep that communication open between you guys and sort of go through the process, sort of together. I've done episodes in the past where it's sort of like ripped couples apart or it's just ripped families apart just because they're just grieving in their own ways and maybe sometimes are not able to sort of really connect over it. I know you mentioned that you guys do celebrate events and stuff with her. Do you still kind of communicate with her on a day-to-day basis? Like, in what ways do you keep her sort of memory, I guess, alive? And can you walk me through that as well? Because people feel guilty letting go of the memory of a person that they've lost. So what was that like for you and your family?
Yeah, people are interesting. We are our own worst enemies. We beat ourselves up for holding on to them, or for letting go of them, or for what we should have done or what we shouldn't have done. And I've heard people who believe in the afterlife, like I do. Sometimes they'll say, "Well, I feel guilty for bothering her. I shouldn't be bothering her all the time. She's got her thing to do, or if can we hold them back? If I hold on to her too much, will it hold her back?" And you'll see that in some movies and stuff. First of all, time is very, very different on the other side, if it exists at all. Our loved ones are not so busy that they can't spend time with us. An analogy I use with people, like if you're calling someone on the phone and they're busy, they just don't pick up. So if you're worried about bothering them, fine. Maybe if they're busy, I don't think they are, so they can't talk to us, they just won't pick up. So for me, it's really, really important to keep Shayna in our lives. And grief work in the old models of grief, like going back to Freud, he would be like, okay, you need to get over the fact that person is never going to be back. They're gone. You have an unhealthy attachment. So let go of the attachment. And that I don't believe works. I know it doesn't work for a lot of people. We use something called continuing bonds, and more, I think, more modern grief work. Continuing bonds means we keep the person with us. So whether you believe that they're really with you or not, and I do, but you can still continue. The love doesn't die. So when a person dies, your love for them doesn't die. We still love them, whether they're there or not. So honor that. For me, Shayna's picture is all over the place. There's the one behind me. I have an Apple Watch. It's on my face is all pictures of Shayna. They rotate through randomly as I look at it. I don't know if you can see it behind me, but there's a digital picture frame, and those are all pictures of Shayna. She's a part of my life every day because the work I do is because of her. So it is a daily communication with my daughter. The first thing I do when I walk out of my bedroom in the morning is I say good morning to my daughter. So I tell people I talk to Shayna more than I talk to Kayla, who lives 15 minutes from me, because I talk to Shayna every day, whether she's here with me physically or not. So in a way, she's actually closer. And my daughter, it's funny because my daughter's boyfriend now, he never met Shayna. But when we get together, we all talk about Shayna, and I think he feels like he knows her because that's how much we talk about her.
Yeah.
So she has a scholarship fund that we give out a scholarship every year. So we gave that out a couple of weeks ago. So that's another way. But for me, it's my daily work. And like I said, for my wife, it's she meditates now, and I know when she meditates, she connects with Shayna. When Shayna first passed, Kayla was 18 and was very shy about talking about it because you don't want to, be the downer. You want to be. I remember her saying, "I don't want to be the girl with the dead sister." But now she's very open about talking about Shayna, and I think we all view Shayna as still being here, and I know that Shayna was a very exacting person. She would tell you exactly how she felt about you or anything else, and so I know that when I see her, she's going to say, "Yeah, I want her to say you did a good job," and everybody tells me that she's going to say that. That's what the mediums tell me, that she's very proud of you, and so I do live my life to make her proud of me.
What do you say to individuals that connect memories of their lost loved ones with a guilt? And why I say this is because I do remember once reading on a forum page someone who said, I feel really guilty because I went through one full day not thinking about the person that I lost and loved.
Yeah.
And I haven't done that in 10 years. And it's the first time that I went through a whole day without thinking, and I feel so bad. What do you say to someone who might?
Yeah, I'd say that's completely natural. Again, I mentioned earlier, every grief is different. So my grandmother lived with us from the time I was 8 years old until the time, or actually probably younger than that. But she lived with us for quite a while when I was growing up. She was like my mother in a very real sense. So when she passed away, of course, I thought about her every day. But it's been 45 years now. I don't think about her every day. That's natural. I mean, my friends, I don't. I have friends that are still here. I don't think about them every day. So I don't know. I don't know why we'd expect to think about this one person every single day necessarily. Now, for me, my daughter was 15 when she passed, and she was my daughter. So I expect I will probably think about her every day. I have a friend who passed away just a couple of weeks ago. Really, really good friend, and for the first week, I didn't think about anything other than him. And it's been, a month and a half now. And I don't think about him every day. And I think about him in appropriate times when I would think about that person. So it's, like I said, it's different for everybody, but never feel guilt about forgetting about somebody or not thinking about them every day. Never feel guilty about being happy. I found that people sometimes will think, well, I should be miserable for the rest of my life. And I was at the party and I laughed. And why was I laughing? Or guilt about, for me, when I didn't cry every day after Shayna passed. I cried every day for, I don't know, probably a couple of years. But I don't cry every day now. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to cry every day. I don't feel the way that I felt then, and that's okay.
I was just going to ask you about that as well, like the role of crying for a person that's grieving, and especially, I guess, maybe with the expectations of the term "men don't cry" sort of thing. What was that like for you in terms of, did you ever feel any pressure by your community on how to sort of present your grieving?
Yeah, that's very real. And as you said, they will criticize us for everything. You're crying too much, but you're not crying enough for what they think is. I grew up in a very stoic family. We don't share feelings. We typically, if we do say anything about each other, it's usually sarcastic. That's my family. So after Shayna passed, they supported me. It was tremendous. My whole family came. They stayed for a week or two. It was great, much beyond what I expected. But a couple of weeks later, they came back and they were visiting for the day. And I had a couple of times where I had breakdowns. So I would leave the room. I'd go outside, go for a walk, or go up to my bedroom, and have a cry and then come back down or whatever. And when my mother was leaving for the day, she said, "This was a good day. Nobody cried." And that was when it really hit me. This is my family, right? It's good that you're not sad. or not presenting as sad. And society does the same thing. People, and I tell people that are in grief, it's like, it's not like they don't care or they don't want you to, they really want you to be happy, and being sad makes other people uncomfortable. So they will try to talk you out of your sadness, because they want, it just makes them uncomfortable. So yes, society will put pressure on you. Men are not, a lot supposed to cry. There's a big thing with that. And I also will say this to you: if you think someone is not crying, there's a guy who's lost someone, you think he's not crying, he's probably crying when you're not around. I would cry in the shower all the time. So that's just when it kind of came out for me. But yeah, there's no right way to do it, and we really need to honor each other. And you mentioned earlier about families coming together or growing apart. There's a myth that when you lose a child, I remember a friend, she said it, she had good intentions, but she said, like 80% of people who lose a child get divorced, or 60% of people who lose a child get divorced. That's a myth. It was written in a book in like the 1960s. I looked it up. And somebody wrote it. There wasn't any research behind it, and it just kept being repeated over and over again until people started believing it. Grief can bring you together. It can bring you closer to people. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to fall apart, but also honor the other person the way that they grieve. Some people will get angry. Some people will get sad. Some people will turn to work. So they might say this is a way for them to avoid their grief. They might just start working all the time. Some people might sleep a lot. So understand that just because people aren't doing it the way that you would do it, it doesn't mean they're doing it wrong, and it doesn't mean they didn't care about their loved one. I talked to a family where the mother wanted to look at pictures of the child and speak the child's name. For the father, it was too painful. So for him, it was like, I want to put the pictures away and not speak his name again. Now, that's the way people in the old days handled grief a lot of times when lost a child, by the way. Siblings would say, no one ever said his name again after he died. And that's because that's a way of trying to avoid it. So for that mother that I was working with, I said, it doesn't mean your father or your husband doesn't love your son. It means he loves him so much it's too painful for him to talk about it. So I said, why don't you say, like on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, we're going to sit down, we're going to pull out a box of pictures, we're going to talk about him, we're going to cry whenever, and then we're going to put it away. So maybe if you kind of like put a limit on it, maybe he could do that, and it would satisfy both of you. So you can come to these compromises where you can honor them, but not let it bleed over into too much. Like for some people, seeing pictures of Shane all over the house they would think that's terrible. How could you do that? I couldn't stand that, but that works for me. And we asked our daughter Kayla, we said, is this okay with you? And she said, yeah, it works for her. Last thing I'll say about this is like her room, my wife loved to go in her room after she passed. She was sitting there and she would feel close to Shayna, smell her smells and whatever. For me, I couldn't stand going in her room after she passed. I would avoid it. Both very natural reactions, nothing wrong with either one of them. We just reacted differently.
Yeah. What did you learn about your relationship with your wife and your family during this process?
For my wife, she surprised both of us. She's a much more emotional person than I am in terms of expressing her emotions and stuff. So obviously close to our daughters, but like she and Shayna and Kayla, it was like the three of them. I'm surrounded by all females, so they're very, very tight group. Yeah. So I was like, how is she going to handle this? What I learned was she was much more resilient than I thought she might be. Losing a child, it's one of those things that, she had even said, probably out loud, but to herself, I couldn't stand to lose my daughter. It's like the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. My daughter, Kayla, she was 18 at the time. I was very, very concerned for her, her mental health, being an 18-year-old and going through the normal stuff that 18-year-olds go through. And her sister was like, it was a weird combination of like her twin and her child because she's 3 years older. So they were best friends, and Kayla had plans for Shayna where she was going to take her and stuff. And I learned she was a lot more resilient than I thought. And I think we're all more resilient than we think we are. We say if that happened to me, I would just crumble, and I tell people, no, you wouldn't. You would do what you need to do. But we also learned that to honor the way each other does grief, to understand, like with Kayla, I would try to give her books and stuff, and to give her podcasts, and that's not the way she processes. So she's like she didn't do it that way, and I had to realize that's okay. If you have a child, when you've lost someone, children, teenagers handle grief differently than adults do. They typically don't like to talk about it, and just want to check in, make sure they're okay, make sure you're available for them. But I learned that I have to honor the way that they do it.
I just want to go back to a little bit about, the outer circle of people that were, coming in and out of your lives during this grieving process. Is there anything, any phrase that someone said to you that stands out to you? Anything that you, looking back on, it didn't rub you the right way, that people can avoid if they come across someone who's in their grieving process?
Yeah, I actually wrote some of those in my book. And it's different for everybody. So there's no one right thing to say. There's no one, there are some wrong things to say. There's some things that are pretty much universally people don't like. I thought you'd be over it by now, is one thing you never ever want to say. You can have another child for someone who's lost a child, like they're replaceable.
Yeah.
If it's someone who's lost a spouse, oh, you're young, you'll find somebody else. People they're not objects. They can't be replaced. No one, you're not going to have another child that's going to replace your child. You're not going to find a spouse that's going to replace your spouse.
Right.
Religious things, God needed another angel. God had a better plan for them. As if God took your loved one away because, and so, yeah, that never really works well for people. One thing for me, and it's really subtle, but moving on. People would say, moving on. And I'm a very visual person, so my vision was like, okay, here's Shayna. She stopped on June 24th, 2015, and I'm moving on. So, which means I'm moving away from her. I much prefer the phrase "moving forward" because I believe that we move forward with our loved ones. So a big shift for me was realizing that, again, my daughter is still with me, and as I live my life, she's still living it with me. So those are a few of the things, some awkward things, and there's nothing anybody can do about this. But when you've lost a child, people say, "How many children do you have?" And a lot of parents struggle with that. They're like, you think it'd be easy, right? It's a number. But for me, I still have two daughters. I will always have two daughters. But then you get into, like, people will ask you more questions. Well, where are they? How old are they? All those things. So you have to kind of like develop strategies for how you're going to answer this. And for me, it's very dependent. Depends on the situation, the person I'm talking to, how much do I really care? If I'm at the grocery store and someone says, how many daughters do you have? I would just say two and keep walking. But I had an experience one night at a dinner. It was a woman I knew I'd never see again. And she said, how many daughters do you have? And I said, two. And she goes, oh, where do you live? And I told her, or are they at Lakota? And I was like, okay, yes, my daughter goes to Lakota. How old are? And then finally I said, okay, well, my one daughter has passed away because I didn't really want to get into this with her. And then, you get the, oh, I'm so sorry. And her face gets all weird. And I'm like, this is why one of the reasons I didn't want to say it. But on the other hand, I've always said, I will never dishonor Shayna by saying I have one daughter. Because I feel like she's standing right there going, you have two daughters. So I'm not going to lie about it either.
Yeah. Man, it's such a tough situation because I guess it gets very hard to know what kind of questions, like as a conversation starter, right, to have with someone that you're meeting for the first time. What kind of questions are okay to ask, and what can trigger what, or what can be sensitive to another individual.
Sure.
There's also, like, I see a lot of these posts of people who's, maybe have undergone a sort of miscarriage, and they get asked a lot of the times, like, hey, so are you planning for a baby? Like, what's going on in your planning phase? not knowing that, hey, like deep down inside that they're having a really difficult time. So how would you suggest then, what do you feel like is a safe sort of approach to something like this, to a situation like this?
Well, the thing is, we're all going to make mistakes because, and again, everybody's reactions to certain things is different. So I tell the grieving person, I'm like, okay, I know this isn't fair, even though you're the one in grief, but you also have to give other people grace and understand they're saying these things because they, not out of malice, not to make you feel bad, they're trying to make you feel better. So they're trying to take you out of your grief, basically. Like, oh, you just lost your husband. That's okay. You can find another one. And they don't realize how disrespectful that is. They're just saying it to try to lift your spirits. So when you're talking to a grieving person, a lot of times less is more. It's better to say a little bit less. You can ask them, how are you feeling? Now, it's interesting because when I get on calls with people, I'll say, how are you doing? Which is just the thing that we say. We don't even think about it. And of course, they're not doing great because they're talking to me. They're calling me for grief counseling.
Yeah.
So I'm like, no, I really want to know. So what I would say to someone who's grieving, like, how are you feeling today? How are you doing right now? What's going on with you? What can I do to help is a really interesting one because people that are in grief a lot of times are just overwhelmed and they can't even think of it. So you can offer like practical things like, can I cut your grass for you? Do you need anything from the grocery store? I'm making dinner tonight. Can I make some for you? Things that are really, again, those really early grief phase, just like physical, like getting by type of things. And then I will help people with like, I again just went through this. My friend who just lost her husband was going back to work. And so I'm like, you as the griever need to have strategies when you're going into these situations as to how to say, like, I really am not ready to talk about this yet. It's okay to say that. Or, I'm having a really rough day. It's okay to say that you're not, because we tend to come back with fine. I'm doing fine. I'm doing great. I'm doing okay. Doing as well as can be expected. But and understand again, you are going to put your foot. I put my foot in my mouth. I've been doing this for a long time. I still, sometimes I was on an interview, and I was talking to someone, and I know you're never supposed to compare griefs, and I slipped and I said, there's nothing worse than losing a child. And the woman who was interviewing me said, I've lost a child and I just lost my husband. And I can tell you losing my husband was harder than losing my child. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's something I shouldn't have said, but it just came out. And that's okay. We're going to make mistakes.
We generally, tend to think what we think would be, maybe either like minimizing the other person's problem by, offering some kind of light on the situation or offering some kind of relief, but not knowing how that relief might even sound. But I love how you said, asking to offer to, I don't know, maybe make an extra meal for them or do something. Focus on the how are you feeling right now is focusing on the present moment and not bringing a person into that past or into a future. Hey, let's just take it minute by minute. How are you in the next 5 minutes kind of thing?
Yeah. And that's really, really important when people are in that early phase of grief to understand that, and I know this from personal experience, I can't think about 5 weeks from now, 5 days from now, don't talk to me about 15 years from now. I would get angry when people would talk to me about the future because I was like, first of all, I'm not going to be here. I had no plans of being here. It's going to be 10 years now. I'm like, I'm focusing on like now. And I'll tell people, I'm like, it's okay to focus on the next breath, forget about like this evening even. And I saw something the day I thought was really profound. It's like, you don't have to make it till next week. You only have to make it till 4:30. So if you're back at work after you've lost someone and you're having a really tough time thinking about the future, just focus on making it till 5:00. And I realized this when I used to have panic attacks, and I realized this about the whole idea of fear, because a lot of us live in so much fear. Fear is all about the future. Fear is all about a future that I don't want and anticipating this future that I don't want. And if you go into the moment and literally right in the moment, no matter what situation you're in, as long as you're able to draw a breath, you're probably okay. Now I may be hungry and I may need food in the future. I may not have any money and I'm going to need, something in the future. But right now in this moment, I'm okay. So I try to get people to do. This is why, I was talking about the practices that I do every day. One of the practices is mindfulness, because if we're spinning out, figure out, where am I living? Am I in the past or am I in the future? Because you're probably not in the present. If you're in the present, you're probably not going to be spinning out.
I like that. What are some of the other practices that you do? Tell us more about those.
The first one is gratitude, which I always kind of smile when I say that, because when I first heard about gratitude practice, I was like, that's a bunch of crap. How is this going? Again, I'm an engineer, right? How is this going to change my life? Me just thinking that things are okay.
Yeah.
And I've realized after practicing this for many years now that it actually it's one of the most beneficial practices you can have, because there's always something going right in your life and there's always something going wrong. Biologically, we tend to focus on what's going wrong because our brains say, I'm here to keep you alive. So we got to look out for the things that are going wrong. So we have to rewire our brain to look for things that are going right. And especially when we're in grief, it's really easy to say, nothing ever goes right for me. My life just sucks. I am cursed. Everything bad happens to me, etc. If we force ourselves to say, I just give you an example. You've lost your spouse. You've lost someone that you really love. And you could say, well, it sucks. They're not going to be with me for the next 30 years. If we had these plans, blah, blah, blah. But what about the fact that you did have 30 years together? What about the moments that you did, the memories that you have? The fact that you may have some savings, whatever. So we could always focus on one or the other. So gratitude, and just real simply to wrap this up, is, for me, I start with, first thing when I wake up in the morning, every morning before I even open my eyes, I'm like, what are some things I'm grateful for? It may be that my feet work. I can go for a walk. During COVID, I was grateful for the fact that I could breathe, because we take those things for granted. I'll be in the shower sometimes. It's like, this water feels really good. I'm glad I'm able to have a hot shower. So I try to focus on the things that we take for granted. Sitting here talking to you right now, it came down to me one day, because I heard about someone having a power outage. That feeling when the power goes out, that you're frustrated, you're flipping light switches, the food's going bad in the refrigerator. There's that feeling that happens when the power comes back on, where it's just like you're relieved and I'm so glad to have lights, right? What if we did that every day? What if we just sat and imagined, what is it? So that's the gratitude thing. Exercise is the second part of it. So I walk 6 miles every morning before I start work. So that's my exercise. It's whatever works for you. But moving your body, whether it's yoga, walking, lifting weights, playing pickleball, whatever it is, that's the body part of it. Mindfulness is the third part, and then practicing self-care. And part of the exercise, the flip part of that is sleep. I know sleep is very, very important. So make sure you're getting the right amount of sleep and stuff. And then self-care, just take care of yourself. Focus on what you need in the moment. I'm blessed to be able to work from home, so I meditate twice a day. Right after I get done with this with you, I've got another meeting, but then I'll do my meditation. I'll take a break this afternoon and I'll meditate. I'll like, sometimes it's like, I don't feel like working right now, I'm going to watch a movie. Just that little thing, doing something for yourself. So those are the 4 practices that I do. And I do them every day, and I found that that's really helpful.
And this can sort of apply to anyone that's going through, a difficult time in their life, whether be it in a grieving situation, be it in a breakup, be it in whatever the situation is. But like self-care, journaling, meditation, mindful practices, gratitude. These are the things that we talk about. So many people talk about how they helped overcome, or not necessarily overcome, but live through that adversity or that difficult challenge in their lives. But sometimes it's really hard to put into practice, right? Especially when we're feeling really, really low or hurt. But it's really nice to have these kind of reminders every once in a while.
And the thing is, it's what I've realized. It's like, it helps when you're in grief and going through difficult times. but it's something we should be practicing all the time anyway, because it helps build that resilience. You're building that muscle, that muscle, and it is a muscle. I tell people, you have you have to work this, you have to develop it. So, I like I said, I came up with this framework because it's literally something that I follow, and it's kind of funny because I do my gratitude when I wake up, then I do my exercise, and then I do my mindfulness. So I actually do it, and the acronym is GEMS. In case I don't think I said that, but the acronym is GEMS. So by putting it into a framework, and I've actually written a book that people can get and say, okay, I'm going to start. What does it look like for me? It doesn't have to look like what I said. I mean, you might do it differently. You might do. Some people like journaling, so you might do journaling for your gratitude. You might do it in the evening before you go to bed. Your exercise. I interviewed a woman. She had lost her mother, and she was going through grief, and people were like, well, you should walk. She's like, I tried it, didn't like it. You should do yoga. She didn't like yoga. She tried all these different things. And then she said, she found powerlifting. She goes, powerlifting turns me on. It was the repetitiveness, whatever it was, and that turned her on. So find what works for you.
This is going to actually segue into the final question of the night. But do you find that sharing your story, sharing your journey, and helping other people through their journey, does that help? Is that a form of self-care for you? And is that something you would also encourage people to do in their own journeys?
Yeah, yeah. One of the things about being in grief, one of the needs of people who are in grief is to have the grief witnessed, have their grief understood. So find a safe place to share your story. It's got to be a safe place, right? So find like a Helping Parents Heal or another organization like that. There's so great now. There's so many affinity groups. I have a small community, a circle community that people can join, but find a safe place to share your story with. And I found that once people, if there is an arc of grief, and as I said, I try to avoid stages because I don't believe there are 5 stages or anything like that. But when you get to the point where you're sharing your story to help other people, I think that's kind of like maybe kind of a final stage to get back to that. That is like that's really helpful for people. I found and interviewing people on my podcast, it's like once you've found this, you want to tell people, you want to help people. I find near death experiences it's really interesting because some people will say, "Oh, they're lying. They're just making it up." Well, I'm part of IANDS, International Association for Near Death Studies. I've heard so many people tell the story. They're not making it up. They're very reluctant a lot of times to even tell their story, but they feel like they have a responsibility to share with people. And I think that for some of us, it's not true for everybody. We want to say to people, "It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay." I was just talking with a woman yesterday, and people ask me, like, well, Brian, doesn't it like make you depressed talking to people who've lost people all the time? People that are crying and stuff. And I'm like, no, not at all. It's just the opposite. This woman I got on with her was a discovery call, and I'd never met her. And I mean, before she even I said, "Tell me about you," or "Tell me about your loved one," and she just starts crying. But by the end of the half hour, I could just tell things that lifted. She saw hope. And so that makes me feel better. So I love doing that.
Yeah, I love that. Talk to me about your podcast, about the work that you're doing. Introduce our listeners to all of it.
Yeah, my podcast is called Grief to Growth. It's grief, the numeral 2, growth. And my website's grieftogrowth.com. On my podcast, I interview, it's a really broad range of people. It's near-death experiencers. It's mediums who have, communicated with people in the afterlife. It's people who have gone through any type of a grief, losing a person or gone through, some people, multiples. I mean, some people have gone through just crazy stuff. And I want to, it's, I guess, I hate the word woo-woo. And I'm not even real big on the word spiritual because I'm a pragmatist when it comes down to it. I'm like, what works? What makes sense? And I'm really sick of in our society, we've said spirituality is over here and science is over there. And you can believe in one, but you can't believe in the other. So I interviewed a guy named David Gaggins who is an electrical engineer, but he's also a metaphysicist. And he was one that really introduced me to the term metaphysics. And he's like, when we look at physics, we think of just the material stuff. But there's all this other stuff too. So I'm really digressing. But so what I do is I work with people. I do the podcast. I have a YouTube channel. I work with people one-on-one. I have a circle community. If you go to grieftogrowth.com /community, you can join my circle community. So you can find me. You just Google Brian D. Smith or Google Grief to Growth, and you can find me in all those places. I have 2 books. The first one is called Grief to Growth, Bury It, Not Plan It. And that was the book I wrote not too long after Shayna passed. And it's really my experience going through grief, some of the things to say, some of the things not to say, what to expect when you're in grief. What is grief? It's just real basic, very short, easy to read book. And then the second book I wrote, it's called Gems of Healing. And it's based on my practice I told you about, the GEMS practice. And it goes into, what those things are scientifically. Why do they work? How do we know they work? Gives you some examples of things that you can do yourself. And I tell people, it's got to be something that's comfortable for you. So again, I give my examples. I just gave you my examples of my framework, but fill it out however works for you. But I think you need some of those 4 elements in there. I think it's really important to have one of those 4 elements in there.
Brian, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing your journey and actually so much insight as well for people to take stuff away from. Really, really informative and amazing. Thank you so much. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Lucas Piri,
Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.